Hello everyone, welcome back to the Plunder Den. In this week's episode, we're going to be building some cranes. So this is another extension of the Trey Parker Plunder Table. In our last episode, we built a seaside market, and this week we're going to extend on that market and go into a shipyard. And a shipyard would have a bunch of cranes in it, so I wanted to build a couple of cranes for this table. An interesting piece to play on, something different, different style of terrain in this whole overall port, but fits really nice. Just a reminder, we built our tavern in the first episode, then we built the lighthouse, and we moved over to the fortified prison, and then as I mentioned, the seaside market, and now we're moving into the shipyard with the cranes. We're getting near the end of the table, the construction of it. There's a few more pieces. I'm thinking maybe some kind of warehouse on the other side. And remember, we have our docks going the one way with the market, and then our docks going the other way. I want to have some kind of warehouse. And then there's a back row there. I've been kind of substituting some of my own buildings back there to fill in the gap on the space, but maybe a city block or a church, something else component on there. So probably two more components that'll be building for the table. And then it'll just be the base itself. Now I have all the foam laid out. We just have to, I want to make some resin, water, and some other things that are going to be in there to complete the entire table. So we're getting there. We're almost complete. And it'd be really nice to get this project all completed and sent off. Really looking forward to seeing it all together, all come together, all these components. The other things that I've got coming up, just before we take a look at the crane, is Blood and Bayonets is coming out. So Firelock Games has released a Napoleonic game. Similar rules, and I would say it's a cousin of Blood and Plunder, has some similarities. But the really cool part is that it has a sea battle component. There's not too many Napoleonic games out there that have a sea component to it. So I made sure to get, I went and got some miniatures from Perry Miniatures that will help us out with filling out those ships in the right time period. So there'll be some unboxing videos, some hobby videos around painting tutorials, and around some of the miniatures that I've got. All sorts of different things coming up for the Blood and Bayonets. Then also, I talked about potentially doing some fantasy aspects, and I've been kind of looking at Idols of Torment, and that's a game made by Black Magic Craft, which is another YouTube channel, a crafting channel. And he came out with a game called Idols of Torment. So it's more of the fantasy side, and some painting tutorials and other stuff attached to that as well. I would like to do some terrain building with that as well. So there's a few things coming up. Of course, we're going to get this Trey Parker table done first, and then we're going to move on to some of those things. But I might be doing some unboxing here and there. I have some stuff that I've already filmed that I'll probably release. And we'll take a look at that as well. All right, so let's take a look at the crane. Now we've been chatting your ear off. Let's take a look at the crane here. So we got two different cranes here. I got a larger one here that's you can swivel back and forth. It's kind of a larger one that you can use for your 6th-rate frigate or your galleon. It's got an opening here, a staircase that leads up inside of it, so you got a balcony. You can actually fit an entire unit up here. There's lots of space between the actual wheels as well. And then we got these platforms up top, which would be perfect for a sniper or something like that. So a really playable piece, interesting terrain piece that you can use. You can come up on the crane and maybe fight on a ship that's over docked on here. Anyways, there's lots of stuff you could do here. And then I decided to add this smaller crane on the other ends for smaller ships that can park on this side. So you have multiple ships on this piece. So it gives it more of like a shipyard more than just one ship, right? So I figured I had at least 2 cranes on here, and if not too overly big, so it'll fit in with the rest of the pieces that we've already built. All right, so that's what we're going to be crafting and painting on the channel this week. All right, if you guys like what we're doing here in the Plunder Den, make sure you smash that like button and consider subscribing to the Plunder Den and get first-hand information when I start these kind of projects. All right, let's get down to the table and start doing some painting, and let's start doing some crafting. Okay, so let's start off with some of the items I used for this project. We got some ready board, dollar store foam board. We got some, this is like twine from the dollar store, but it has a wire in it, so it's good for hobbying. We have, these are just stuff I got from Michael's, different shapes. I got these circles. I decided they would be a good size for the wheels. And then I had the smaller hobby wood, also I got from Michael's. And then assorted balsa wood, which I got from Amazon and Michael's. I was really happy to see that Michael's actually started carrying balsa wood back in their store again. So I was able to get, it comes in long strips like that, which is fine, and just cut it to whatever I need. But we got us our insulation foam and the coffee stir sticks. These are the ones I buy from Amazon, a box of 1,000. Willow fencing from the dollar store. I get that here in Dollarama. And that's pretty much it. These are the main items we're going to use for this project. Okay, so I started off with just cutting out the shape I wanted. I kind of fit it based on what was on the table already. Kind of knew I wanted 2 cranes, so I wanted to be more like a shipyard, so multiple cranes, not just one. Larger one for something like the Spanish galleon, and something smaller for, it could even be just a small longboat or whatever, right? So then I didn't really know what it was going to look like and what a shape, so I just cut some shapes of foam out. These are the same height as the docks that were on the seawall and the seaside market, so I kind of wanted to be consistent, so they all hooked to connect together. And then as I was going there, I just I want it to be wider in the center there because I want to have a larger crane, so I just kind of added more blocks to fill in the space. But I always start with the base first to see, what size I need on the table and to fit everything I wanted. So then I just sanded some of the edges, used my tinfoil ball here, and put some texture on all this insulation foam just to give it a rocky look to it. Even though a lot of it won't be exposed, but any little bit that is, it'll at least look like it's stone. And then once we did that, hit the multi-surface craft paint, especially on the dollar store foam board on both sides. And that's just to seal it in and stop it from warping. Once you start gluing stuff to it, it'll start warping. Now, again, you could use hardboard if you want. I prefer the light dollar store foam board. So then I glued it down, and to get everything nice and straight and true, I just added some weights on top. My drywall compound and some paint, and let it sit there for 24 hours. And it just, when it was dry, it's perfectly straight and perfect to build on. All right, so the next step I started was putting. I kind of wanted to have like a fenced-in barrier, and it kind of matches what I've already built over on the market, seaside market there. I had this kind of walkway with planks on it. And actually those planks are like the edge of the table, right? So it would be on the edge of the table. So I'm going to add in those coffee stir sticks, cut them as a fence around, glue it to the side. And then I showed you the willow fencing is more for the docks. So this is what I completed here. And I added that, this is a balsa wood, really thin, as a trim on the, just to add a little more detail to the fence. Then I got to use some coffee stir sticks and some balsa wood here to kind of frame out the size of the base of the large crane. Now you can see how I just notched it that way, where I didn't fill in the corners. It just helps you glue those straighter if you have some more than just gluing it. Well, it's harder to keep it straight, so that's why I leave a little notch on there and help glue those pieces on the balsa wood. And then I showed you I'm gluing some of the docking to the end where the smaller crane is going to be. So I'm going to move that all the way along there. Probably going to trim out the outside of this first, so kind of make like a curb to go around the outside before I actually start filling the planks afterwards. So you can see there it's got that little curb, and then I added all the other planks. I made them a little bit longer on that end because that's where the smaller crane is going to be. I left that pretty well open right now. I plan on probably doing certain other things in there and have the boards going the opposite way. And I made a space for this dowel. It's a larger dowel that I plan on using as a swivel for the larger crane. So then I took that hobby wire That stuff's really cheap. It's like $1.50. It's great. I made all the native village buildings and stuff out of it. It's great stuff, but it makes great for your docks and stuff. So I just wind it around there with some glue and holds those little willow fences in place. And then I'm just going to strategically place these around there. So just give it a little more dock feel to this entire thing. I am going to have a whole bunch of loose ones. It's kind of like a seawall or a barrier wall using timbers. We are going to add some stones as well, but I just wanted to have some timbers on there too, just to add a little more interest to it. And to give it a more, like it's docks. So I added these braces on the bottom, which would make sense to hold a large crane on there. There would be a lot more support beams on there, so I wanted to add that detail in before I started adding stones. And then I'm just going to finish off putting all this. I'm kind of going to just continue on with these timbers all the way around the whole structure before I start putting rocks in. And kind of complete off the sides of it before we move on to rocks. Now, I made rocks in the last episode in the Seaside Market, so if you want to know how I built these, refer to that video, but I've done it on the channel several times. So these are leftovers actually from that project. So I didn't have to really make any. I'm just going to use what I had left over and put it on here. I didn't need a ton of rocks, but just a few rocks. Just to kind of have a rocky barrier around everything as well. And again, added more interest to the whole overall piece. If it's a seawall kind of retention wall, because it would be on the outer side of the bay, there would definitely be some stones and rocks and stuff that they put in there to hold this whole wall support. So this is after I've completed all the stones. I put all the willow fencing barrier. I used regular popsicle sticks, kind of bigger, just to offset it so it looks something different than the actual coffee stir sticks that I put. And then I glued the dowel in place. You can see the notches I left. I decided to go too high with the balsa wood, just to give it a little edging, so it's easier to glue the posts in there for for that bottom of the crane. So now we're going to build little parts for the ends of the smaller crane. These are just small round hobby wood. The really, really small things, you can get the smaller ones at the hobby store as well. I actually had these left over from my ship builds from Firelock Games, punching out the pieces in there. There's always little wooden tabs left over. You should keep those. They're good, handy things. I make them out of lanterns and all sorts of stuff. But you can buy something similar just at the hobby store. It's just a lot more expensive. If you have it kicking around, you might as well use that. So then I used the round pieces that I showed you that I was going to use for the kind of the wheels of these cranes. And I just use that little sanding tool. You could use like a Dremel tool, would be way faster. But I just essentially punched a hole and then just kind of turned that thing around until I made a hole in it. And then I'm kind of just making a frame around where the post is. So that's the dowel is going to be how wide it's going to be. So I kind of made that hole big enough to fit the dowel in. So I got two sides. I primed it before I glued it together. Just so when you see in, you don't see the bare wood. It would be darker inside. And then you can see how I made these two ends. They're going to be the ends of the actual crane itself. So I made those with just the hobby wood. And these are some coffee stir sticks and a piece of balsa wood in the middle. Pretty simple construction. And that's going to be the base of our crane arm here. And we're going to run rope right through the middle of it. That's why we left it open. And I kind of added a smaller piece on the end of this dowel here, which gives me a nice support for so the rope doesn't fall off, essentially. It just keeps it in place. And then I started adding coffee stir stick details to make it look more like a wagon wheel with spokes and stuff. I had contemplated not doing it on those round pieces, but it's so much easier just to do it this way. And I really didn't think it would add too much more to the aesthetics. I kind of liked it this way, and it was easier to construct. So then I added more coffee stir sticks to the ends. I plan on adding another row in between each one of those, like so at the very top there. Completed putting it on there. It looks like a flying saucer right now. But it's going to be a wheel there. And this is pretty much the arm. I added a support on it. It looks more like a little more sturdy that you would see on an actual crane itself. Now these, like I said in the intro there, I found lots of images of cranes online for different centuries and different areas of the world, and kind of put them together to kind of made the crane I wanted. These kind of style wheeled cranes were even used back in medieval times, so it's something that would easily have existed at the time of the golden age of piracy. They probably would have had something more simple in the Caribbean, but you know me, I like to play with history a little bit and make it a little more interesting. So you can see I'm just making some A-frames on here. I glued a coffee stir stick to the bottom so you have a nice flat surface, because when I glue it to the deck of the piece there, I want to have a nice broad surface. That's costume jewelry. They're actually little stickers you get from Michael. I use them for, I glue them on to make them look like bolts. It doesn't matter what color they are. They come in pink and blue and all sorts of crazy colors. It doesn't matter. I just want the shape. I'm going to cover with black primer anyways, and it looks like there's bolts on everything, so you get a more industrial look to it. So I definitely wanted to add some more bolts to it. And I'm just showing you what I already mentioned, that's going to be the swivel part of the main crane. So this is the other half of the smaller one. I already glued it in place. And the other thing I wanted to consider was keeping the space around the crane. Obviously I want to make it playable and fit a Blood and Plunder miniature around it to make it interesting to fight around the crane on top of being able to fight inside the crane, which we're going to add some details in there to help us out with that. So these are all the crane, smaller crane pieces all completed. And I really want to prime these before I start gluing everything together. I really actually started painting these pieces a little ways away, because once you glue them, you can't get back at them, right? So you have to kind of paint this whole project in stages. So I painted everything up to where the base is, and you can see I added cross support beams to make it look more interesting, but obviously a lot more sturdy. And then I added a little ladder that's going to go up to the opening on the bottom of the crane. I put a kind of a one solid side wall where the staircase is. These are just design choices I just decided as I was going along that I thought would be interesting for the base of this crane. Now, the images I saw was actually that base being much taller, but decided to not make it too crazy. I didn't want to make it like as tall as the lighthouse or something crazy like that. I wanted it to be smaller so this is important why you kind of match it up with the other pieces you already have on the game table. So everything here is primed in black once I've assembled everything, and I'm going to go ahead before I glue any of these things together on the crane. We're going to start doing our priming colors. So we got a real brown coat here. We're just going to hit everything with that. I like to paint the base before I move on to the larger crane, which is going to be like a whole separate thing that I'm going to build and add to the top of this. So next color we're going to use is bark brown. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you're familiar with all these colors. These are all folk art paints as my main source of my base colors. And then Pueblo is an orange color that I'm going to add. It adds a little brightness to everything. We're going to add that to everything. So I'm just putting in stages. Really, I just kind of use a larger brush and brush this on. Now, I've shown this technique in several of my videos, but so I'm just going to kind of go over it to save some time. So as this is quite a large project and takes a lot of different components to it. So this is after I've added all that. Make sure you don't get too crazy with that Pueblo. Just lightly put it on. Don't put too much on. And then I'm going to go back to a real brown and yellow ochre mixture. Kind of like a 50-50 mix. And that's what I use to brighten up the decks of the boards and the wood and stuff like that. It gives it a nice brighter yellow color. And then I go different directions from there with washes and with other craft paints over top. So you get this kind of yellow worn out look to the wood, which I really like. I use it on the decks of my ships and stuff like that. So now I got a smaller brush and my little dry brush in there. We're going to hit some camel. Camel's good for the stones. We're going to keep adding the realistic stone look to everything here. And I'm going to add some of this camel to the whole piece. I just add a little dry brushing of certain areas all over the piece. So you can see I've lightened it up. It gives it kind of an older wood look to it, or a worn out look. And I've done that on some of my ship tutorial painting videos. I glued everything together now. But you can see that I'm starting to add some extra supports that I couldn't do until I actually got the rest of it glued together, but I had to paint it first. Like I said, it has to be done in stages. So now the tricky part is going back to paint the pieces that I got to glue on to hold that thing together. But really, you're just using the primer colors again, and who cares if you spill over top, because you're going to cover it all, and it's going to all match at the very end. So these are all the little extra supports. I wanted to make it really sturdy on that end, so I added a lot of different supports on there. And then I decided I wanted to do a little fence around the bottom part of it. I already went ahead. That's just thread. I wheeled it around the wheel there. And you could turn that wheel and actually move it up and down. I just use a jewelry hook on the end there. This guy right here I got from Michael's. And that's pretty much my rigging on there. It's not essential to me that it works. It's not essential to the game. I just wanted to, look like it legitimately could work. And when people look at it. All right, so let's move on to the larger crane. So once we got our base on there, I wanted to have a smooth surface for this dollar store foam board to slide on. So I added a layer of coffee stir sticks to the top of that base that I was building. So now it's nice and smooth and nice even level. And you can see this turns really nicely on here, which is exactly what I want. I didn't decide to add anything to the bottom of this. I'm just going to leave the paper side on. Of course, I'm going to paint it. But I like it smooth like that, so it's easy to slide up around on the top of this larger base here. So first thing I'm going to do is trim it all out, frame it all out with some balsa wood, coffee stir sticks. We're going to frame the inside of that opening where the staircase goes down to. Just kind of start framing this whole base out. Now, the only thing I would suggest doing, what I didn't do in the video, is paint that black first before you start gluing stuff on. I actually glued it on before I painted it, and I did get a little bit of warping. So, I broke the cardinal rule because I always prime everything first. And for some reason, I decided just to go to town and start gluing popsicle sticks on there. What I ended up doing is I did paint it all, and then I just added heavier weights to the top of them, and that kind of over time it straightened it out. So remember, when you do that step, don't do what I just did. Make sure you paint that black first before you start gluing all that stuff on there. Seal that piece of dollar store foam board in, and then it'll be nice and sturdy, and you can glue all these popsicle sticks on, and it won't do any warping of it. It's just the amount of glue you add to it. It starts warping and it starts bleaching into it. So again, you could go and use a piece of hardboard if you want, and don't even use dollar store foam board. I'll leave that up to you. But again, I like the lightweight of the coffee stirs. Of the dollar store foam board. So I'm making 2 wheels for the main crane. So it really rinse and repeat from the very first one. We're going to do the exact same procedure there. And we're just going to make 2 this time. Same size as the other ones, but just this larger crane is going to have 2. So I decided to put a little fence on it on the front. This is where the little balcony is going to be. And right by the opening that leads to the stairwell. Just so you have like kind of a shooting position from that main part of the crane. So just showing you some little small balsa wood. I'm just going to frame around the openings of these sides. And then eventually I will do the larger framing to glue them together. And just like the first ones I did, I painted them black first and then glued them together. And then I made our coffee stir stick design to make it look like a wagon wheel kind of thing. Our spokes. And that gives us sells us that wheel look to it. And then you can see how I glued them together. And then I got to add to the trim on the end to make it look more like the rest of them, like the smaller one we just did. So essentially, like I said, repeating what we already did, but just on 2 other wheels. I just showed you some black folk art craft paint, and we're going to seal in all this stuff I just did, especially the inside, before I glue those pieces on. So I painted the inside first because you can't get at it once you glue those other pieces in. So make sure Again, you got to paint the stuff in stages. And it is time consuming because you got to wait for each step to dry. I use a lot of craft paints, so it takes a little bit longer than miniature paints, but obviously cost effective, big time. And craft paint's way more sturdier. Once it dries, it's solid, especially on your terrain. So I decided to do these A-frames again. There was 2 for the smaller one, but this larger crane is going to have 4 because I have to support the 2 wheels, plus essentially support the entire large crane that's going to be above it. So I decided to go with these kind of A-frames. I am going to glue some coffee stir sticks to the bottom to make them flat, just like the previous ones, and then glue them on like this. You can see I kind of made a couple of planks on the top and then planks on the bottom, just to give it a little more strength, because right now it's kind of wibbly wobbly. And I did let it dry before you start poking that dowel through like I'm doing right there. Make sure you let everything dry. Once it dries, it's super solid, and you can actually start playing around with that dowel. And this will determine how well you did with your measurements to make sure all your A-frames are the same height. I had one that was slightly off, so I ended up having to like shave the inside of the A-frame just a tad, just so the dowel would sit in it straight. But sometimes you just got to be extra careful. But at the end of the day, I got around that problem and was able to fix it, able to shove the dowel. So the dowel is going to go through the 2 wheels and through the middle of all those A-frames. That's going to be the main support of your crane here. So this is the large arm of the crane. It's similar to the smaller one, but I doubled it up. So I double up balsa wood in the middle. Those are coffee stir sticks on the ends to make kind of the arms. And I used all those circular kind of hobby wood that I got from Michael's. And those little nibs on the end are actually, like I said, from the Blood and Plunder ships. But you can get something similar like that at the dollar store. I just don't buy them because I already have a bunch from the ships. And then I went with those sticker jewelry, bejeweled things there for bolts again on the end. So it looks like it's all bolted together. So fairly simple construction. It looks complicated, but it's not really. Just a bunch of things glued together. And that's going to be your main crane. So I put a large piece of balsa wood in the center of the A-frames, and that's what I have the large crane sitting on. So I put that in first. Once I put that in, I had these cross beams kind of holding it up on the front, and it just kind of glued some supports on the side. So it kind of made like it had ears, so you can glue on both sides. It just gives it more strength overall. And then I added another balsa wood to the top just to give it a little more interest to the top, because that's where we're going to run the thread through too, right? So we want to have a place to, like a tunnel or a track for it to sit in. So everything else is on there. And like I said, I put these 2 beams here that I'm pointing at. That's just coffee stir sticks. That's all it is. I just cut them, and it actually sticks into the inside and the outside of those A-frames, and then sticks to the actual main crane itself. And everything turns, so once you add the rope to the 2 dowels there, then you run it through the crane itself right up to the front of the top of the crane. And you could actually use this one. I actually ended up painting it when I put the string on, so you can slightly move it, but again, the moving of the rope and stuff, it wasn't important to me. It was important that it was there because it should be there, but I didn't want to make it that wasn't important to the construction of it. Overall finished piece anyways. But here we go. I've just added the rope. That's just thread. I glued the first bit of thread on, wrapped it around there. I actually just used the wheel to tighten it on there, and then ran the thread up through. And you can see I kind of added more details to the top of the arm. That's really just to hold the thread in place so it doesn't wander off the sides. And then run it through the middle of it, and then I kind of tied them together on the end, and then hooked it to one of those jewelry hooks again, as I did with the first one. So this is mostly all the construction completed on this. There's not too many things I want to do. I did want to add a little cover detail, kind of where I wanted to have like snipers in here. So I added this kind of like a roof. In some of the images I saw of cranes, they had kind of a roof on it. So I wanted to add that in there. Plus I wanted to have a roof hatch I mean, kind of like a door hatch for the bottom where the stair or the ladder goes. I added some planks, more planks to the top because I wanted places for miniatures to sit on. I didn't completely cover it, just covered some of it because I wanted to be able to see the rope detail. And as I was building, I just kind of fit a miniature in there and make sure he fits in there good. This is one of the taller ones of the crouching miniatures that the Firelock Games has. So it fits nicely in there. So I should be able to fit most miniatures in that sniper area there. So that was just something I took consideration when I was building it. More interesting places to hide on this crane. So then we're going to hit the craft paint on there and prime it like everything else we've done. And I'm really going to skip through this really fast. I'm going to go through the same 3 colors, real brown, bark brown, and Pueblo. And you can see these are pieces that I added to the other components. And we're just going to hit it all at the same time and get it all done. And get it all completed, primed up so it matches everything else that we've already done. So then I'm going to hit the, this is after I've completed all that painting. And we're going to move to that real brown yellow ochre mixture and kind of give that aged wood look to everything. So we're going to go ahead and mix that up and hit all these pieces with that as well. And that'll make sure it matches pretty well with what we already have on there. So this is after I've completed that. I didn't put in the video, but I did use some camel in between the spokes on those wheels, and I just kind of brushed it in there just to make it a little light. I started from the middle and worked my way out. Some of these other colors here, like the hardened leather and dark wood, I use for some of the wood trim and stuff on here to give it a little more variance so it doesn't just like one color. And then this paladin bone I use as a wash over top of the decks of the wood. It gives it a nice rich yellow color to it. Once you've covered, it's kind of a dull color right now from the craft paint, but once you add that speed paint to it, it gives it a more vibrance. You can see it's a little more yellow. It gives it that color I'm desiring there. You can see the camel I put in the wheels there to brighten it up a little bit. You can see that hardened leather is that kind of more orangey browns going on there. It also gives it a kind of weathering look, even though we're going to add more colors over top of it. That's gunmetal. We're going to hit some of those areas where there's bolts and frames and stuff. This is more of a contrast dunes here, and Agrax Earth Shader is kind of a grunge team to dirty everything up. Malignant Green, that's algae and stuff growing on there. This is supposed to be in the Caribbean, so and then the Mummy Robe is to lighten all the stones up. And I kind of hit some on the wood as well, just in a few key areas just to brighten it up a little bit, kind of define some more edges on the crane, just so it's a little easier to see. So this is after I've completed all that. I'm just taking a look at all the different colors we've added on there. Everything's looking real good. Got all the colors we wanted to lighten up the stones and the bricks there. And you can see that I've added some of that metallic colors and some of the white to everything on here. It's just a little added highlights and detailed. So then we got this electric blue, ultramarine blue, and this highland blue speed paint. These are the 3 that I've been using to do my trims on the edges for water, and then use this blue waterscape. It's a resin pour. But really, I just brush it on. I pour a little bit in a container and then brush it on over top of once I've done the paint. So you want the lighter paints closer to the rocks, darker as you go further out. The Highland blue is the darkest. And so you can see got those 2 tones of blue in there. And I added the resin over top, which gives it a nice, rich blue watercolor that I really am going for. I'm just showing you I added a few tufts in here and here. Just a little bit of growth of plant life. A couple of different variants from... some green ones, some yellow ones on there, just a few tufts on there to add a little plant life. And the last kind of step here is the multi-surface. I recommend getting the gloss one. I only have the kind of a satin one, so it's flat. So I actually add a little gloss over top of the white. And it's just for the little wakes in the water that are around the rocks. So this is after everything's completed. We're going to take a look at the entire completed piece. All the water is completed around the stones. All the weathering we've completed on the cranes. And Really happy with everything on here. Looks really good. And we're just about ready to fire it on the game table and see how it looks with the rest of the terrain. But I really wanted to just show you this before. Sometimes I take you to the game table and we can kind of get lost with all the stuff on the table. This way we're just focused on this piece on its own. Really happy how this project worked out. This is exactly kind of what I thought in my head that I wanted. And like you said, there's lots of gameplay stuff here. You got this balcony you can shoot off of. You got that upper area for snipers. You can hide behind the wall in this smaller crane. You can come up through that crane on the other side from a smaller boat. I'm really happy with this overall project and the way it looks. It actually almost kind of has the feel of Lord of the Rings when the goblins build all those apparatuses for building things for their armies. Anyways, it kind of reminds me of that. All right, so let's take a look through the game table. There is the fortified prison. Go through all the pieces that we built for this Trey Parker table. There's a tavern that we built in the very first episode. You can see we're starting to fill this game table out. And this is the two structures for the seaside market. That was a large piece that we built in the last episode. Now that other seawall, I'm going to replace that with the one with the warehouse. That was probably my next project for this build. There's our lighthouse that we built. And then we're going to move on to around through our pirate fleet here that's attacking this Spanish port. We got our Spanish galleon that's going to be on our shipyard that we're heading to once we get around all these pirate ships. Now there's our pirate warding island that we built on the channel here way in the past here. Not part of this table, but I added it on there just I thought it should be there. Anyways, here's the Spanish galleon, and we're moving on to the shipyard right here. So this is a crane. You can see what it looks like with the miniatures on it, and compared to the Spanish galleon. Galleon is quite a large, tall ship, so I wanted to have a really large crane that was over top of that. You can see the comparison side by side. But then I also wanted a smaller crane for some of the smaller ships that we have here. So we're going to take a good close look at that smaller crane and, the miniatures relative to everything on the table. These are all Firelock Games miniatures for Blood and Plunder that are on here, which is what I designed these pieces for, is that game. But you could use these shipyard pieces for all sorts of games. You don't have to use it just for Blood and Plunder. It could be used for all sorts of other games too as well. All right, so that's pretty much a wrap on this project, this component of the table. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to get to the rest of it. I will see you in the next one.